Russian state TV threatens nuclear strike on U.S. Oh, boy. Well, Tucker Carlson said they're not going to bring back mandates or lockdowns. They already did that. The next way that they gain control over the U.S., they're going to start a hot war with Russia. I think it's fair. Tucker does mention this. We're at war with Russia, and anybody saying otherwise is lying. U.S. personnel are on the ground, volunteers. They're using U.S. equipment. They're trained by NATO. They're trained by the U.S. They're provided intelligence by the U.S., missiles by the U.S. The UK's sending depleted uranium tank busters. Yeah, it is NATO versus Russia. It's a proxy war. Well, now we have this story. This could be Newsweek and Western media trying to ramp up fear that there is a reason to go to war with Russia. I'll give you the long story short of it. You have this guy. It's Korchenko, right? Yes. Editor of the newspaper National Defense. He basically said Russia is being warned and threatened that if we misbehave or if, Ben Hodge's opinion, we exceed what he considers to be the necessary permissible lines, for the use of all types of Russian weapons, he threatens us with more than just strikes on the Crimean bridge. He responds by basically saying, if you engage in war with us, we will not go to war with the U.S. in Europe. We will go to war with the U.S. on U.S. territory. He says in response to your attacks on Russian military or civilian facilities, the first strike will be a preventative, limited strike against targets on the territory of the United States of America. I think it's BS. They point out in Newsweek and a couple other outlets, the most effective way to use nuclear weapons by the Russians is to claim they have them and that's it. But it makes no sense to target U.S. civilian territorial targets because all that would do is make their position in Eastern Europe worse.
I agree. Russia has no reason to do this. This is some random guy that goes on Russian state TV. Maybe he's looking for a better paying job and he's trying to come out and say it. But the fact of the matter is Russia controls 87,000 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory. The ratio of Russian troops to Ukrainian troops lost is insane. Ukraine's lost 400,000 plus men. Russia maybe 150,000. They have no reason to do something as extreme as this, and that really wouldn't be in Putin's, line of governance either.
Let's make all of the corporate media outlets happy and give them an article to write about.
Yeah.
What's the likelihood you think that the U.S. would engage in a false flag to justify expanding the war in Ukraine?
I think they already did. I mean, that was 2014 when the Maidan massacre took place. The Western press all said it was a bunch of, Ukrainian government, Yanukovych-aligned individuals that rained down with sniper fire on the protesters in Maidan Square. 12 years later, we learned that it was actually Georgian Legion snipers that were out there.
9 years.
9 years. 9 years later.
2014 and 2015.
9 years later, it was Georgian snipers that were out there at the behest of the now new Ukrainian government,
We know that for sure. I've not heard that.
Yeah. Canadian researcher, look him up. He did the study. It was Georgian snipers that did it. Also, in Oliver Stone's documentary, he touched on that subject. But the snipers were firing from the buildings around Maidan Square that were controlled by the Azov-aligned individuals within the grab for power.
So here's all I can say as to that claim. Western media outlets say that it's propaganda issued by Russia, and Russian outlets say it's confirmed. So this is war.
Mm-hmm. It's war.
Who are you siding
People
with?
will die. People will die.
But just like the idea that I will say it's not above any warring nation to engage in a false flag, especially as it pertains to overthrowing a government. The U.S. is going to claim, and Western powers are going to claim, this is what the Russian-aligned government was doing, and Russia's going to claim it was Western forces trying to overthrow the government, install their puppet.
And then also, I mean, look at this. You have the, I won't give my full opinion on YouTube, but you have the Nord Stream pipeline incident. And you had everyone in the West who's saying that was Russia. It was definitely Russia. And I think everyone knows who it really was. You can look at the Kremlin drone attack. They were saying that was a false flag by Russia. Then we turned to find out that the Ukrainian government put a postage stamp out celebrating a Ukrainian soldier flying the drone over the Kremlin and bombing it. I mean, the list goes on. I'm sure Russia, maybe this is war. False flags happen. But
absolutely. And let's clarify. We have this from the Washington Post. U.S. had intelligence of detailed Ukrainian plan to attack Nord Stream pipeline. The CIA learned last June via a European spy agency that a 6-person team of Ukrainian Special Operations Forces intended to sabotage the Russian to Germany natural gas project. They claimed over and over and over again that Russia did it. They even speculated that Russia could have dropped a bomb through the pipeline. So when it got to that point, it blew up, which makes literally no sense. Russia, Vladimir Putin being like, I have the perfect way to defeat my enemies. I'll blow up my own oil pipeline. What?
It didn't make any sense. And yet this was all of the Western media was like, that's the only explanation. Russia must have done it. And then slowly it sort of came out that, oh, actually, this thing that seems improbable is actually probably not true.
Yeah, it was it was what it was. Whoever did it, I mean, that's the CIA Washington Post saying it was Ukraine who did it. Seymour Hersh has other ideas, Biden administration. But at its core, what happened with that? I mean, it was an escalation of war. It prevented Germany from being able to negotiate with the Russians by turning the taps back on for the Nord Stream pipeline. And it made a real big issue for Europe. They had to buy Russian liquefied natural gas. They bought 40% more liquefied natural gas from Russia in the EU over the past year. So, I mean, it just caused prices to go up. You have the German economy, you have the French economy, you have the Italian economy that are all in shambles right now. Europe is in an inflationary crisis. They're about to be in a recession. Germany's already in a recession. I mean, it's quite clear what's happening.
What do you think is the ideal circumstance right now related to the war in Ukraine?
Like how a peace deal,
resolution?
Peace deal.
Yeah. How but what is it?
Well,
Right?
I think if you listen to Putin, which no one in the Western press and Western governments, they try not to, I think he's quite clear about the fact that this 87,000 square kilometers of territory they've already taken is formally now part of the Russian Federation, and it should be respected as such. The former French president has come out last week and said that, there should be formal referendums in these regions to actually decide whether or not they want to join Russia. We've already seen these elections, though, and they weren't internationally regulated, but these people said they wanted to join the Russian Federation. And I think Russia's not going to stop and try for a peace deal again until they get Nikolaev and Odessa, which will landlock Ukraine, and also get the Kharkov region in the northeast. I think once they get that, maybe they'll try to push for peace proposals again. But until then, I mean, it's gonna be the same old people. Unfortunately, are gonna die because no one in the West is serious about pushing for peace.
Can I ask, what are the major differences between the Soviet Union and modern day Russia?
Well, the main differences, I think, I don't know. I think the Soviet Union was pretty base, but I think that the Russian economy today, if you look at the economy, if you talk about that, what is the basis of the Russian economy? Well, Soviet Union at its start, the country was at its knees. You had basically a feudal society, and the Soviet Union took it from its knees to a war superpower, won the Second World War at the cost of 27 million people. But it also centralized the important sectors of government, and we're seeing that in Russia today. Instead of in the United States, where we have all these rapacious, private companies that are hoarding our resources, hoarding our oil, hoarding our gas, hoarding our coal, whatever. In Russia, they have it under a public structure. It's under the government. And they can actually, utilize these systems to benefit the people and negotiate with other countries like BRICS partners in terms that are going to be beneficial to the Russian economy and the central bank. And that's what's happening with BRICS. They're expanding very fast.
This matters a lot. Pull up, take a look at this from the BBC. Russian military control. Look at this. They have all going all the way down to Kherson, nearly to Odessa. All of Crimea and everything is under Russian military control. We keep getting told, or we've been told over and over again, that the Ukrainians are pushing back, but it really feels like what they're doing is, for every 10 conflicts that arise, let's say it's 10 battles, Ukraine wins one, that gets reported in the press. And so everything we hear is like, their counteroffensive is working, they're gaining ground. This is crazy. And not anybody who's been keeping track of this, I mean, look, Russia's basically won. They've taken the Donbass, they've taken the land bridge to Crimea, they've got it. And it's not over yet?
And not just that, but the cities that Ukraine is taking, if you look at the pre-war populations for these cities, it's like 50 homes, 400 people, maybe a few farms. It's nothing. In this big counteroffensive that we put all this money to, Ukraine hasn't even reached the first line of Russian defense fortifications. They have 3 lines of defense fortifications that they've been building up since last November. Behind those 3 lines, they have tens of thousands of reservists. And then back in Russia, they have even more reservist soldiers than Russian soldiers in the whole of Ukraine right now. So it's only going to go in one way. It's going to go, I guess, 2 ways maybe. However Russia wants this to end, or mutually assured destruction.
Whatever happened with the Bakhmut situation? Because I know that just was in the news for the Ukraine war for a while, and now Prigozhin, which I'm also curious to your thoughts about how that's all played out. What's the deal with Bakhmut? Because I feel like we've almost seen a stalemate. There's been no progress either way. At least someone as a casual observer of what's been happening in the war. So yeah, I'm curious to your thoughts.
Wagner, under the leadership of Prigozhin, so when he was still alive, months ago, they fully liberated the city. They took it 100%. So none of it remains in Ukrainian control. There's still some firefighting on like the flanks, the outside regions of Bakhmut or Artyomovsk, and basically what's going to happen over the next several months is the Russians are about to start an offensive of their own because they defeated the counteroffensive from Ukraine. They're going to focus on the flanks of Bakhmut. They're going to focus on maybe Kherson, and they're definitely going to focus on taking back the whole strip of land in the northeast, the Kharkiv region. They're going to probably take all of that back. And then we'll have some down period, and then next spring is when you're going to have the large blowout of the Russian soldiers pushing in the south all the way through Kherson to Odessa. They're going to completely landlock it and take all of that.
Okay.
It's kind of crazy to see, because I've not been actively tracking the maps of control, but they kept saying that Ukraine's winning, Russia's losing, they're on the verge of defeat. They kept saying that Russia's suffering massive casualties. And they're like, let's operate under the assumption that the reporting about massive Russian casualties was correct and Ukraine was winning. How does Russia now have total military control of the land bridge to Crimea and then some?
And it's not like this is, under contest. In Mariupol, Russia's already gone in. They've built new schools, new grocery stores, new hospitals. They've built free apartments for the people there. They're happy, and the numbers are lies, as I'm sure we can all assume. They lie about everything in the mainstream press. I mean, Ukraine's it's like a generation of men, 400,000 men. Russia's got 4 times the population of Ukraine. How could anyone ever expect that Ukraine was going to win?
I saw a meme that could be propaganda, who knows? And it was a 4chan green text where it was a Ukrainian dude, and he was like, 1 year ago, I'm engaged, about to get married, I'm working at my job, making an okay wage, everything's fine. He's like, today, log on to social media and see my fiance dancing in a slutty dress in Germany, having a party at a rave, and I just got my draft papers, I'm going to be sent to the front lines where I'll probably die. Why is my life like this? Yeah, the people there, I mean, I got to be honest, the people I knew fled. The people that I knew from Ukraine aren't there anymore. And they're posting pictures on the beach and other places, and I'm just like, what is... Russia's moving in, they're taking, and I'm just seeing the media lie about what's going on every step of the way. How do we end this and just say enough? Because at this point, I don't see an argument based on this map for Russia gives up territory it won in a military conflict. You lost. Perhaps a peace deal could have happened a long time ago before Boris Johnson destroyed it. And then you could have actually preserved some of this land under Ukrainian control or prevented the death of people and ceded it in the first place. I don't see how this ends well for the rest of Ukraine or for NATO. I do honestly think that if U.S. interests and NATO refuse to let go of this, it's going to escalate into a more direct conflict.
I think it depends on who gets elected. Trump said... He sounds insane when he says, I'm going to end the war in 24 hours, right?
I believe it.
But yeah, of course we believe it, because if you withhold funding for Ukraine, their government collapses in hours. Their government employees, their soldiers, their pensions, their firefighters, their police, the corrupt people, stripping people off the streets to go on the front, they're all funded by the U.S. taxpayer. So they collapse within hours if we stop. And Trump said he's going to put a peace deal forward. If Ukraine doesn't like it, that's the end.
I think that the moment they announce Trump as the projected winner, Russia immediately says ceasefire, because we know what happens when Trump comes in, and we want good faith efforts to put an end to this. Mm-hmm. And I think Ukraine agrees, knowing their funding is about to end and it's time to find a safe way to retreat. Donald Trump gets on the phone. I bet the moment Trump wins, he's on the phone saying, we're going to have, once I'm officially in and hands on the Bible, this is done. I bet they'll try and get him on the Logan Act or something before he's brought into office. They'll try and stop it. But I think the moment Trump is in office, he gets on the phone and says, there's no more war. We're negotiating tonight. I'm flying out. He flies out. It's over. Like you said, the U.S. cuts off funding to Ukraine. There's no war anymore.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Either that or it continues to escalate, as you said. I mean, the Russians, There are 27 million people serious to protecting their civilization. That's how many they roughly lost in World War II. And they see this as a similar threat. So they've lost 100,000 men so far. Who cares? I mean, that's sad. That's terrible. But they're willing to go a lot further to protect their country, their civilization, and their land than 100,000 men.
And they have the population and resources to commit to that.
So we've heard what we've heard from the press, the corporate press in the United States, is that Vladimir Putin's evil, and he's like Hitler, he wants to steal land. That seems a bit one-dimensional. Even if that is the case, and you genuinely believe Putin is just evil and says, now's my chance to steal land, there is a goal to the land they're taking and a strategic value to what they're doing. We don't hear it that often in the general messaging from the press. Much like with the war in Iraq, they hate us for our freedoms, which was completely meaningless to people who paid attention, but sure, worked on those who didn't. I'm curious, from your point of view, why did Russia invade, and what is their goal, and what are they ultimately hoping to achieve now?
Put it as quickly as possible, Ukraine is not a sovereign country. It's just not a real country anymore. It wasn't since the U.S. came in and toppled their government in 2014. You have a sovereign government topple your country, do away with any form of elected representation, say this guy's leading your country now. If you don't like it, they're going to sick these Azovite or right sector thugs on you in the Donbass. They killed 15,000 individuals in the fighting, many of whom were civilians in the Donbass from 2014 when the coup took place to 2022. The Communist Party of the Russian Federation is the second largest party in Russia. They were begging Putin to go in and save these people in the Donbass for the past 8 years. They were saying, you're insane. Why are you doing anything? Why aren't you withholding energy to Ukraine? Why are you doing something? So they were very critical. The other fact here is that in 1991, Secretary of State James Baker said NATO is not going to extend 1 inch east past of Germany. They violated that promise, I think like 16 or 18 times now. They got all the way to Ukraine. That was the red line. Boom. I mean, that's that. And the violence didn't stop. The escalation continued up until the week in which this war started. But again, I don't think this war started on February 24th, 2022. I think it started back in 2014 when a foreign government came in, seized power, and started to commit violence against any dissidents in the state of Ukraine.
But do you think that the goal of Russia is to oust the Ukrainian government and to establish like a legitimate government, or is it actually to control the land into Crimea? That's what it strikes me that's what they're looking to get. I
think multiple things can be true at once. You can also acknowledge that the land that Russia sees, it's resource rich. That's $12.4 trillion in resources in that 87,000 square kilometers. So multiple things can be true at once. But yeah, I think the end goal here is to have a government in Kiev that is not backing Nazi thugs that are killing people in the Donbass. And I think Yanukovych was a guy who was couped. He wasn't explicitly pro-Russian, but he was also looking at EU contracts, doing deals with the EU and integration with the EU. I think Russia just wants someone that's going to be fair in there. But if it comes to force and forcibly putting someone in, I think we can all assume it's going to be someone who is going to be pro-Russian.
Do they ever talk publicly about their war goal, the Russian Federation?
Of course.
What is their stated goal?
Stated goal is denazification of Ukraine, do away with all these, these Nazi battalions, Nazi political parties. From 2014 to 2018, there was a good deal of Nazis within the Ukrainian government. 2018 onward, it wasn't the case. But the chair of the Verkhovna Rada in Ukraine from 2014 to 2018, he was a self-described Nazi. This guy said, well, I don't know if I should say that here. I'm not going to say it, but you can look it up online for yourself. These are people who really profess these views. You see the videos that Laura Loomer posted in Orlando this week of these guys with swastika chains, and they're saying, we support Joe Biden because he's sending rockets to the Ukrainians. These are the guys that are fighting over there. These are guys in government in the Verkhovna Rada, and they're trying to strip the Russians of their ability to speak Russian in Russia, all that stuff, right? So denazification, demilitarization is the other goal, stated goal of the Russians. That's just simply dealing with NATO and saying, you can't come over here. You can't put nukes right on our border. They're going to be so close. They said that the U.S. said that during the Cuban Missile Crisis that the nukes in Cuba or the missiles in Cuba, that was, a threat. Those were putting missiles right in our backyard. Well, I mean, like, if you look at Ukraine, how close they are to Russia. I mean, it's right on the border and you're going to put nukes there. That's basically putting nukes in someone's living room.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.